Greetings friends and welcome to the cutscene / QTE / QuickTime event tutorial. I'm just going to show you the cutscene for starters. So we're going to go over a number of things like camera, lighting, sound, subtitles, dialogue, so on and so forth. I'm also going to show you how to have QuickTime events. So for example here, if I press the button it's going to do something, but if I don't do it in time, it's game over. If, on the other hand, I do press the button in time, then it's going to take us to a different level, and then we'll be able to have a bunch of other options. So this is a quick time event. In other words, an event that is timed where you have to press a particular button, and if you don't do it, it'll be game over, or you'll take damage or whatever. Now I've taken us to another event, and this is kind of like a typical dialogue situation where you have a number of options to choose from. So it's asking what's the next action, and then you'll choose one of the three. You'll see that it's not timed, kind of like dialogue text conversation. When you're speaking to a particular character, you have as much time as you need to do it, and once you choose something, shwashwang, it's going to take you to that particular event or that particular, next level on the event cutscene sort of situation. So you can create characters and stories that have choices and consequences and all sorts of things, friends. So without further ado, we have gone over it, we've looked at it, now let us get stuck in. Whoop whoop! Well then, friends, let us begin. So here we have our beginning design elements. So I've got a few pigeons here. Which are kind of going to be the protagonists of my little cutscene. I've got my enemy here as well as his little weapon. And I've also got like a bit of a hilly sort of background. Of course, nothing particularly crazy. I kind of expect that when you're going into a cutscene, you have the particular design elements that you want. In other words, your location, your characters, various props, so on and so forth. It's good to sort of have them at the get-go so that you can really just jump in with the cutscene itself. So I'm not going to go over how I design these or anything like that. I just sort of tried to give them a bit of character. You see this dude doesn't like pigeons. He's going to go after these pigeons. So here I have my various design elements. You're going to want to set those up to begin with. Now I'm going to want to set up some logic elements, friends. So what I often do in my scenes is I create something called the pink box. So I go into guides and then put on a grid snap. And I'm just going to make a sculpt. And the sculpt is going to be just a pink box. You don't have to worry this is going to be invisible when the scene in the game or whatever is actually playing, but it's just so that we have an instantly identifiable location where all our logic is going to be situated in the scene. So if our scene becomes busy and there's lots of logic, lots of characters, lots of puppets running around, we'll always know that our pink box is where all our scene logic is. Alrighty, so we're going to go logic and processing and snap down a little microchip. Now it's important, friends, that in your microchip, we'll call this, let's just call this game logic. It's important that wherever you situate your animation, or in other words your cutscene itself, which generally I recommend putting in a timeline, or in a microchip and then in a timeline, it's important that you don't start moving things around once they've been placed. So for example, I'm going to say game logic and then I'm going to say cutscene 1. If, for example, if we have multiple cutscenes, so let's say cutscene 1, lovely stuff. You can even make a cutscene microchip and then make cutscene 1 inside that, if you know what I'm saying. So we'll have cutscene 1. And for example now, just to sort of demonstrate why it's important to not move these microchips around, is because if I put a camera here, right? Let me just put in a nice camera. I'll have it looking at our night just like this. And if, my scene gets a little bit complicated and I'm like, I actually want to put these things, in a different position, I'm just going to move this microchip over there or, put it in another microchip. If I now go in here and I see my camera, its position actually is going to have changed. And that isn't too hectic of a change, but imagine if you've got 10 different cameras, 20 different cameras, and now they're all offset slightly, it'll completely mess things up. So it's very important, friends, that once you add your particular microchips and your scenes and everything, once you have them set, they must stay there and they mustn't move around. Any moving around you must do before you put in all your cameras and so on and so forth. So there you are, friends. That's just a little bit of a tip. So now we can begin with some of the setup. So we have our design elements, we have our characters and our landscape, we have where our logic is going to be in the cutscene 1 microchip or folder, whatever you want to call it. And now we're going to establish a few things that's going to make it easier for us to animate and create our scene. These are kind of just the setups. So we're going to put down a keyframe, and in our keyframe we're going to go to our characters. Some of them may be puppets, some of them may not be. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into them and we're going to make it so that we're going to go into their behavior page, and we're going to make it so that their procedural animation is turned off. This makes it so that when you make your own custom animations for your characters, the procedural or the default dynamic sort of animations that take into account sort of like physical properties and so on and so forth, you know, what surface they're standing on and if they're falling or not, all of those things we're going to disable. Because, for example, imagine you sort of trying to make your character do a nice jump animation, but the procedural animation will say it's not on the floor during that animation, so it's going to start doing a kind of fall procedural animation. So basically we don't want too many dynamic systems working at the moment, so we're going to turn them off so that only the animations we put in are going to be working. It's also not going to be worrying about like default poses messing with your thing, or idle poses and so on and so forth. So we're going to turn off procedural animation, and you're going to go to all of your puppets and do this. Some of them might have it turned off already if you sort of have things that are, if you have your own sort of puppets that you've been making and you aren't using procedural animation already, but you just go into behavior and you just disable these chaps for all of the various characters. As you can see, I've actually turned them off for some of these already. Now we're going to rename this keyframe and we're going to call it no proc. So now we have no proc, which stands for no procedural animations. Lovely stuff. And we can change this to purple or something. And now, friends, we're actually going to do another keyframe. And this one, we're also going to go into our puppets. And we're going to go to their physical properties. And we're going to turn off movable and collidable. Now, the reason that we turn off movable and collidable is so that, once again, we aren't having dynamic physical forces acting on our puppets. Like, if I want my character to sort of walk and their foot kind of goes through the floor or whatever it might be, I don't want the game engine to start registering that as like a physical interaction and then the foot starts messing around. Or, for example, if I want to pick up my sword with my character, if it registers the character's hand and the sword as both physical, movable, collidable objects, they won't actually be able to, you can't like hold the sword, because the sword will actually be moving into the sort of physical space of the hand, and then it'll start jumping around, which isn't what we want. So we must make sure that movable is turned off as well as collidable. Some of them might have movable already off. So yeah, just some things to note. Okay, sweet. So I'm going to go to this keyframe and I'm going to say no fizz. And fizz is sort of short for physical properties. So there are now no physical properties either. And I'll make this sort of another color. So now we have established two things. There's no procedural animation on any of our puppets. There's no physical properties on any of our puppets when these particular cutscenes are playing. It's also important that you highlight them with X, O1 and square, and make sure that they're turned on. By default, when you just put a keyframe into a microchip, it's turned off by default. So it's important that you turn them on. So yes, when this cutscene is active, these characters are going to basically just be like static objects, which are great because that just means you can control and move them around freely without any sort of dynamic forces acting on them. So lovely stuff, friends. We have just set up our characters, the design, so on and so forth, and we've also set up some of the basic logic building blocks that we have over here. Another thing that we might want to set up is that the controls are disabled, because of course you don't want to go into a cutscene, and if your character can sort of punch and kick, you don't want to make it so that while the cutscene is playing, players are pressing buttons randomly or even accidentally, and your character randomly does a punch animation in the middle of like a very serious cutscene. So the way that we're going to disable controls for these particular cutscenes is done in two ways, and you can of course choose whichever one you prefer. The sort of easiest way, but with a little bit of, it's easy, it's simple, but it kind of requires a little bit of, repetitive tweaks. So what you can do is you can go into cameras and lighting and of course grab yourself a camera. And one of the great features of the default camera is that it actually has a built-in feature which allows you to disable control. So you can see here, disable controller sensor input. This makes it so that your characters, even if you press buttons on these particular controller sensors, shwang, 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 even if you press buttons on those, the characters aren't going to do their default animations, you know, jumping around and punching and kicking and so on and so forth. So while this is simple and effective, one of the sort of tedious things is if you have a bunch of cameras in your cutscene, you must of course make it so that you know, when you disable this, you must disable it on every single camera that you have. So if you have a bunch of cameras and if at one point you don't have the setting turned on, then it could, like, you know, sort of make it so that you can control your character again in the middle of the cutscene. So you must just make sure that if you use this, you have disable controller sensor input on for all of your particular all of your cameras. One other potential limitation is if you want to have a dynamic interactive cutscene that doesn't use dialogue text displayers, then, or the dialogue gadget, then you might not want to use this because it disables controller sensors. So for example, if you wanted to have in the middle of your cutscene something funky happens, or like a quick time event or whatever it might be, using your own logic, then this might not be for you. But if you want to use dialogue text gadgets that allow you to, like, you know, press square for this dialogue option, press triangle, all of those still work even if this disable controller sensor input is turned on. So basically this is a simple and easy way. It's just a little bit tedious because you have to kind of do it to every single camera that you have, and if at any point there isn't like a camera on something, it could, you know, allow your character to control things again and move things around and so on and so forth. So yes, that's pretty cool. The other option that you can use, and which I often use, is I just put down a little keyframe, and in this keyframe I will go into my various characters that I have here, and I'll go into their controller sensors, and I will go possession mode in the important properties, and I'll set it to none. So all of my various characters that I have here, I'll make it so that their possession mode is none. Go to this chap as well. Possession mode, none. So now they can't be possessed, and basically when they aren't possessed, they can't be controlled. It basically like kind of disables the controller sensor. And so they can't really, you know, be affected by all our various button inputs. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, let's say depossess. Depossess. Sorry, there's a lot of S's in there. Depossess, so we're going to depossess, we're going to turn that on, and we're going to make it red or whatever we might make it. But this isn't the end. So this is the first part of this strategy. So we depossess them so they can't be controlled. But also we must go into gadgets, and then we must go gameplay gear and grab ourselves the one that looks like the world, the global settings. Now the global settings, we're going to go into the second page and make it so that allow imps is turned off. Now why do we do this? When you depossess a puppet, the imp is going to jump out of it automatically. And whether that's depossess using the sort of depossess feature that's built in, which is the one that looks like this little, or like if you turn forced possession on or off, all those sorts of things, or you use depossess over here, whenever a imp depossesses or is no longer forced to possess a puppet, it's going to jump out of it and you're going to see your imp. So if you don't want that, because it can kind of break immersion, you'll just turn off allow imps. So this second strategy is to have a setting that says depossess, none of these things are possessable, and you aren't going to be able to see imps. Why I like this strategy better is just because in my timelines where all my animations and my cameras and my keyframes are, I don't want to have to worry about checking, you know, whether my 20 cameras have this particular thing set up. So I literally just have one keyframe, I have one little gadget, and I know that there's not going to be any controller input problems, and so this is what I do when I set up my particular scenes. But the camera system is actually super easy. It still works with the dialog text displayer, so if you want to use that one, that's perfect as well. Alrighty, so now I think it's time for us to get stuck into the meat and bones, or the, you know, the protein-rich section for my vegan followers, of our cutscene video. Let's get stuck in. So now animations, physical properties, and controls are not going to be messing with our particular cutscene. Now we can begin with animating it ourselves. But before we actually get to animating, one of the important things to do is to block your scenes. Now, blocking has many meanings. Blocking can mean just animating what your characters are going to be doing, how they're going to be moving about the scene, how their expressions are going to, and their physical gestures and stuff are going to be articulated. Blocking refers to all of these things. What I'm going to use to begin with is sort of basic blocking in terms of where the characters are going to be in the scene at the particular moment, from moment to moment. So it might be useful when you're making a cutscene to create a bit of a storyboard. With a storyboard, you can have lots of fun in terms of figuring out, okay, I'm going to have this shot and the character's going to be here, then I'm going to have this shot and the camera's going to be there, and really just experiment with all those sorts of things. So I've done a little bit of a storyboard, nothing crazy, just something simple so I know which shot comes next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself into animate, and then I'm going to grab a timeline. And this timeline is going to be, let me put it over here, is going to be the host of many, many gadgets. So there's going to be a lot of stuff in here. Definitely brace yourselves for this tutorial, friends, because it's going to be a doozy. So I'm going to just move these little microchips out of the way. So I now need to determine where my characters are going to be. I'm not going to animate them too hectically at the moment. I'm just going to determine firstly where they're going to be, and following that where the cameras are going to be in relation to them. So we're going to do sort of cameras and blocking simultaneously. Basic blocking, position blocking. So I have my first keyframe. And this keyframe I'm going to use to change the position, not the particular animation, the position of my characters. So, what I want to have in my first little scene is for this pigeon with a hat to be like injured and dying because he's just been attacked by this evil knight. And then our cool pigeon protagonist is going to find his friend all injured and stuff, and he's going to be like, oh no, sort of kneeling over him. So I'm going to get my pigeon dude into position. Let's find a sort of place in the scene where we want this to be happening. It can really be anywhere. So I'll just put him over here. Now in this, I'm going to stop recording because I'm just changing their physical position now, not what they're going to be sort of looking like. So this keyframe is going to be, let's make it a sort of orangey color, because this is going to be referring to the position of my first Pidgey. So that's going to be, I'm just going to quickly name it Injured Pigeon. Lovely stuff. Injured Pigeon. So my injured pigeon is going to be roughly there. Then I'm going to add in another keyframe, but add a little bit of space here. So this keyframe is going to be our protagonist pigeon. And the protagonist pigeon is going to be sort of like here, near our chap. Cha-ching. We can of course adjust these things as we need. So here we are, and we'll just sort of set them up like so. For now, I'm going to be like, cool. We'll just call him WP, short for Workout Pigeon. In case you're interested, this is an origin story for Workout Pigeon. Anyway, so here we are, and now we have Injured Pigeon and we have Workout Pigeon, and their starting positions. Why have I left gaps underneath here? Because while these keyframes sort of will show the position of the characters in the scene, below them is where the specific animations are going to be. So I'm just going to skip ahead for just a moment. I'm going to show you, I'm now going to just animate the injured pigeon ever so slightly. And I'm going to put him in his sort of like injured position. So I'll hide everything else, and I'll just sort of rotate him around a bit. Oops, I didn't actually put that hat in properly. Let me put it so it's actually in his head. Lovely stuff. On his head. So let me just get that little keyframe. Let's go into this pigeon. And then let us change his position. Ooh, so that he's lying down and looking all injured and stuff. Ooh. Blech. So he's looking injured. Let's see how it looks. Not too bad. The grass might be a little bit long, so I might go to this grass and turn off the fleck, go to the fleck properties and reduce impasto ever so slightly. Impasto is of course the sort of height of the flecks, so we can just adjust that a little bit. That's looking cool. So I'm going to make it so that our particular character, and we'll make these the sort of same color, that kind of orangey vibe. So this character's position has now been determined, and now this is also what their kind of body parts are doing. So think of this as position and this as their animation. So I could call this, let's actually rename this so it makes sense. We'll call I, P, and then we'll call it pos for position. And then we can name this one IP anim. So one is their sort of position in the greater scene, and then this is the position of their particular body parts. You don't have to name every keyframe this, you know, whatever it might be, but we must just make it so that this particular row is only going to be holding the IP's position, so the injured pigeon's position, and this one is only going to be the injured pigeon's, that's quite a tongue twister, only their animations. Similarly, for workout pigeon, it's only going to be the positioning, so we'll call this WP pos, and the next one will be WP anim. Now that's looking pretty cool, and I'm just going to sort of extend this over here. So now we have the injured pigeon's position and the workout pigeon's position. Not necessarily exactly where it's going to be, but the general sort of vibe. Now we can put down a camera. So we'll go into gadgets, cameras and lighting, and put down a camera. And this camera is going to be looking at them. We can decide like, ooh, how are we going to be looking at this particular chap? So I might go from here, and I'll be like, okay, sweet. So here we have our pigeon over here looking down at his friend. So that's looking pretty cool. But of course, where I put this camera is going to be not here exactly, but I'll put it a little bit above. I often keep the like top layers for cameras and dialogue and all those sorts of things. So here we have, we'll sort of just line them up so that they're all sort of ish together. Lovely stuff. So this camera is going to be looking at them, and this chap is out there, he's getting shreked, and our workout pigeon is going to be there. Now I want to make it so that our workout pigeon is sort of kneeling next to him. So let's go in there, get those animations. The position is looking good. Now I just want to make it so that the animation itself is making sense. You might want to turn on hide everything else. It's a great feature, just so that you can move those body parts around without the scene getting in the way. So now workout pigeon is going to be kneeling next to his friend, sort of looking down at him, all sadly because his friend is injured. So now let's see what this looks like. And that's not too bad. What I might want to do is just adjust the workout pigeon's position. So I might just adjust it so that you can see a little bit more of his sort of face. Lovely stuff. And you can of course adjust the position of the camera. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And then I think I might just make a few more tweaks to the position. One pro tip, friends, is if you want to do things like see where the camera is looking when you're making changes to an animation, go L1 and X on the camera, then L1 and circle to exit the camera. So now I'm looking exactly where the camera is going to be seeing, but I'm still recording, so I can still make my various edits. So I'm going to be like, okay, sweet, lovely stuff. I might bring this foot out a little bit more, put this one a little bit there, and just change the angle of the face ever so slightly. We'll turn off hide everything else. So now we can see like, okay, cool. That eye line looks to be pretty much on the money. Lovely stuff. And now I'm just gonna sort of drag this out. And we now have WP anim. You might say, yo, mean lad, brew, why are we adding all this, like, why are we having multiple different keyframes? One is showing position, one is showing their sort of animations. We could actually do all of these as one thing. And of course that is true. You could, rather than having two layers of animation, or one for position and one for animation, you could have them both as one particular keyframe. I kind of just find it useful, especially if your character is moving, like doing a jump or whatever. You can almost make a smoother thing if you have one keyframe that controls sort of movement. So if one keyframe goes point A, point B, point C, point D, so one controls that movement, and then you can have a separate line of animation that is specifically for their, like, you know, if they're doing a somersault or a forward flip, their particular animations as they go about that. So it's great because you can adjust how long it takes them to do the jump and the particular animation in terms of their physical body part movements. You can change the speed of that or whatever it is without having to do things, you know, simultaneously. I'm not sure if that exactly makes sense, but it's basically just you have more control with this approach. If you want to keep it simple though, you can of course merge these two. Alrighty, so we now have workout Pigeon's position and his animations, but we might make this animation slightly, you know, add a little bit of business to this. So we might make it that his, you know, head is going up and down a bit or something. He's sort of like, oh, this might be where a bit of dialogue sort of hops in, where he just goes a bit like, oh no, my friend. I mean, of course, Workout Pigeon will probably just say, Kurr. But, you know, the subtitles will tell us what they're thinking. So now they are going about their business. The animations are on. So now let's see what this looks like. I'm going to press play. Lovely stuff. And now I'm going to go play mode. Swish, swish, swing. So one of the things that happened there was, because my camera that I have when I'm moving around the scene was sort of over here, in the camera by default, if you go on and square, you'll see that its transition type is set to smooth. So it'll go from wherever you were, it'll then go to the camera position that you are. So what I often do is I put it on cut and I make the transition time 0. Of course this depends on the kind of things you want to do, but for the beginning of a scene I'll just go with a cut. So here we are, just a very short one. We see the characters sort of interacting there. Now we can drag this out, make it a few seconds longer. You might want to put on the timeline snap, and this will make it so that it sort of snaps to particular moments. So for example, the 3-second mark, and you don't have to worry about things not lining up perfectly. So I might move these chaps over. Cha-ching. So now when we watch, he looks, and then he does a little head thing, and then it sort of will move on to the next cut, for example. So this is one shot. So now we have done the blocking, and we have done the camera, very basically. Now one thing I want to show you, friends, is the lighting. So with the recent update that was made to Dreams, they've added some really awesome new opportunities when it comes to lighting. Now what I'm talking about here is the fact that Paint can now emit light even when it isn't, even when it isn't visible. So now what I can do is this. I'm going to go to sculpt mode quickly and put on a little grid snap, and I'm just going to put down a little cube. Lovely stuff. Then I'm going to go into paint mode, and I'm going to go all the way to the right, and I'm going to make an opaque square. Then I'm going to go colors, and I'm just going to go with something like white. Then I'm going to go guides and make it so that surface snap is on. And I'm also going to turn mirror off. So I'll stamp this one down, but also make sure that you go into tools and you go stamp fleck. So we've done a few things there. We've got a cube that sort of serves as our basis with the grid snap on. We have surface snap, we have the grid snap, no mirror, all that sort of business, and we are stamping the fleck as opposed to brushing or, you know, drawing it. Now we stamp it down. Why do we stamp it? Just so that it's solid color, you know, and not sort of thin or semi-transparent. Now delete that cube, and we now have a sort of a little square. Now what's great about this square is we can go to emit light from glow and set it to always. Now you can increase the light of this and even the size as well, and you can make it so that the opacity is 0, but the sort of lighting will remain. So let me just sort of demonstrate this. If I sort of look at my character here, you can see that parts of their face are like kind of dark because the sun is over here, it's right above them. But I don't necessarily want them to be so dark at the moment, so that you can't actually see their faces and stuff. So what I can do is, I'll turn grid snap off because I want a little bit more control. I can make it so that this particular chap over here lights them up from below, but when you look into the scene, you're not actually going to be able to see this. So I'll go opacity 0%. Now when I go in, there's much better lighting on these particular characters, and you can see their faces much more clearly. If you lose sight of your little square that you've got, your little lighting square, you can go into show and hide, go preview invisibility, and these chaps will then appear. What's great is you can like really go to town with this. You can change the size of it, and you can sort of see what's going on. Remember, if you want to see how it's going to look in the camera, L1 and X on the camera, L1 in circle, and now you're in that exact position. Now I can be like, okay, sweet, it's going to be like this. I'll increase the brightness. I'm not increasing the brightness, I'm just increasing the size of it. I can go like this, and it'll look like they're flipping, you know, walking into the pearly gates, as it were. But yeah, you can really mess around with this and sort of be like, okay, cool, I want like a little bit of light like this. And like I say, friends, this makes lighting so much easier. I was just totally terrible bad at lighting, and I still don't think I'm great. But this is a lot easier and a lot more fun, really. So now what I could also do is be like, you know, I kind of want to have like a bit of maybe a color palette difference. So I'll go to cope mode, and then I'll go something like, let's do like a little bit of green on this particular one. You can make it so that this emits like a little bit of a greenish glow. So let's go like over here, for example. And if I add this, you can add like a bit of a vibe there. And of course you'll want to make it so that show and hide is turned off. And then it might not necessarily be exactly visible at first. But if I deleted it, you might be able to see then the difference. As you can see there. So there's a little bit of like more greenness there. So this is just an example of how you can use lighting to change the sort of quality of your scenes. So I've just changed the position of that green business. Lovely stuff. So I won't actually keep that green for now. I'll just stick on the white. But as you can see, it's very, very cool and very, very easy. What you might want to do is make it so that these particular lighting elements are only lit up for the particular part of your scene that they are in shot, as it were. So that you don't like have another scene where maybe this is sort of only appearing in the corner of your eye, but you've got like a really well lit piece of grass, and it kind of becomes noticeable. So for that, we're going to throw down another keyframe, and you can have a whole bunch of these. You can have a whole row of them, but this will be the lighting keyframe, and that one will basically make it so that this is turned on. So we can make it that by default it's off, and then when this particular keyframe is on, we'll record with L1 and X. We'll make it so that this is on, and we can call this one something like lighting. Make it yellow or something like that. Lovely stuff. So we'll go, we've got lighting, and we'll call it lighting, of course. It's very important to name your keyframes. And then we can have a time. So at the moment we have done a few things. We've done the position of the characters. So we've got the injured pigeon, and we've got the workout pigeon. Sorry, I should just move the timeline over here because this is a little bit of crazy back and forthness. So I've got the position of our chap. I then have the particular animations they are in. I then have the workout pigeon. I have the particular animations that the workout pigeon does, the little face ones. And then I've also got our particular lighting. The next thing we might want to do is add a little bit of dialogue. So I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go to, shall we say, sound? How do you record stuff again? No, sorry, you go modes, and then you go sound mode, and then you go tools, and finally you go sound recorder. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of dialogue. So let's listen. Lovely stuff. We might want to edit that a little bit, you know, sort of reduce that business. If it's a little bit too blocky in terms of where it's starting and stopping, you can of course turn off the timeline snap. So I'm just going to line it up with his head movements. So it goes like here. So now if we play it all together, we can see it kind of lines up. That looks pretty cool. And yes, I kind of like to put dialogue I mean, it's useful to have it here because you can sort of line it up very nicely. But I like to have dialogue and camera just like a little bit separate from animations and stuff. You can, of course, space these things out to your heart's content, friends, which is great. So you can be like, okay, cool. My camera stuff is going to be here. My dialogue is going to be here. And then, of course, there might be another layer of sound, which is sound effects. Now, this might not be specific to a particular shot. All of these things are shot specific. So when these shots end, for example, that lighting's going to turn off. The camera's no longer going to be on, so on and so forth. But when it comes to background sounds or sound effects, those might actually persist between various shots, or things like music, for example. So let's put in a little bit of SFX as well. And by that I mean sound effects, not special effects. And we're going to go into sound mode, then we're going to go into search, then we're going to go into sound effects. Now we're going to go sound effects, and we're going to go to something like ambiences, and we can do something like nature. And just have like one of these foresty ones. Maybe forest calm, lovely stuff. Depending on the mood of your scene, you'll adjust these things. Okay, so we're in a foresty scene. There's a bit of dialogue, and just for that little 3-second or whatever it is, 3-second little shot, as you can see, we've got quite a few things going on. But as we've broken them down, it's actually fairly simple and not too crazy. The last thing that we'll want to add to this is, of course, subtitles. Subtitles are great because, of course, they make things really just a bit more accessible to all the dreamers out there. So let us go into gadgets, then we're going to go to movers and output, and then I'm going to go to subtitles, which kind of looks like a TV screen with little lines at the bottom. Now for these subtitles, not only is it helpful in terms of translating what Pidgey is saying, once again it just makes streams a bit more accessible. So we're going to go enter text, and then we're going to say, okay, cool, what is Workout Pigeon going to be saying here? We could just say that he's saying Kurr. And then we might say, like, in brackets, or something like, what happened? I didn't actually write dialogue for this, so in my dialogue I just wrote like Kurr a bunch of times. So what happened? Exclamation, question mark, close bracket, close parenthesis. So that's going to be for this business. So let's see what it looks like. Kurr. We might want to have that there for a little bit longer, just so that people can see what's going on. Kurr. Okay, now let's play it all together. Kurr. Kurr, what happened? Or maybe something like, who did this to you? Or, whatever. Anyway, dialogue, you can mess around with that as you please. But these are the key elements when it comes to making a shot. And, of course, multiple shots make up a cutscene. So here we have it, just in summary once again. Blocking in terms of position and animation. Once again, position and animation. Camera, lighting, dialogue, subtitles, sound effects, /music, /background, /whatever. Lovely stuff. Let's move on to the next shot. Now, when moving from shot to shot, and potentially camera to camera, there are a few things that you could do. One approach is that you could just make it so that there's one camera for the entire cutscene. And when you move this camera around, you'll actually do that with your own little set of keyframes. So I'll go into animate, grab a keyframe, and make it so that, okay, cool. For this shot, the camera's going to be there. And then for the next shot, I'm going to be recording. I'm going to go, I want an X on the camera. And the camera's now going to be over here. Lovely stuff. And the camera's looking at this particular angle, so on and so forth. So that's, of course, very cool. There are some advantages to using this method, because, of course, with the keyframe, not only can you change the position of the camera sort of once, you can make it actually become animated and move in all sorts of strange and fantastical ways. So, for example, it could go like Ooooh and do a nice little thing. It's really great to use keyframes, and I mean potentially like whole camera rigs, if you're like following characters, or if, you know, you shoot a bullet or an arrow and you want the camera to like follow the arrow as it flies. You can check out my game Boom Bowling, where I make it so that when you shoot the cannonball, you actually follow the ball as it sort of hits the target. So that stuff is super easy. You just attach the camera to a physical object, and then you teleport that physical object with the camera snapped to it to the object that you want to follow. You just put a tag on the object you want to follow and teleport it there. Easy as pie. But coming back to what we're talking about now, you can make yourself a nice keyframe situation here that moves the camera around in a dynamic way. So you can have your own, like, you know, steady cam vibe. You see, there was just a little bit of movement there, nothing crazy. But you can really have fun with keyframes. So that is really great. And using one camera for your particular dream as you sort of mess around with it is sort of low on therma, and it's perfect. And of course, there's also nothing particularly wrong with using multiple cameras. I sort of use both methods, you know. Sometimes I'll have a camera that sort of I might make it so that one camera is specifically for these characters, and then I'll have another camera that is specifically for you know, when I'm looking at the baddie, for example. Really, friends, whichever method you like. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to make it so that every particular shot has its own camera, has its own, you know, animations, has its own dialogue, so on and so forth. So it's going to look very distinct. This may not be the best in terms of thermo, but I've not really had any problems in terms of having lots of cameras in my animations and stuff that I've made and in my cutscenes. Some people might be like, me lad, using too many cameras, that's crazy, bro. And that's possibly even true. But really, whatever works for you, friends, is cool. If you find that, like, the cameras are using a lot, well, then you can just reduce them and use keyframes. But once again, it's up to you. So let's see, where is our next camera actually going to be? I've just copied our last camera, so all the settings that are there are, of course, still there. So let me just look at my storyboard quickly. So after... Okay, cool. After our little Pidgey sort of, our workout pigeon looks at this dude, it's going to zoom in on his face. And our injured pigeon is going to like sort of look up. And then after he's looked up, he's going to sort of like faint / die. Depending on, you know, whichever one you want to say. So there we are. We've got our IP anim. We can just copy that one. And we're going to drag it so it's going to be like he's going to be kind of down for the first little bit. And then he's going to sort of like slowly lift his head. Now, one problem with cameras is they can be super annoying and just get in the way. And even when you go hide everything else, they'll still freaking be there. So one thing that you can do is go into show and hide and go electronics and make it so that lights and cameras are turned off. So you can have it so that, you know, electronics are whatever. Make it so that lights and cameras are turned off or on. When you're like animating, particularly like close-up scenes, for example. So now he like looks up. But of course you might want to turn that back on again. Lovely stuff. So he's going to look up. And then he's going to sort of like faint back down again. Once again, these damned cameras are in the way. And don't worry, you only really get this problem when cameras are like super zoomed in and close up. He's going to be like, ugh, and then he might be like, whoo. You know what I'm saying? I'm just making sound effects, but I feel like you get me. So he's going to be like this. He's going to be like, he lifts up his head and then does like a little bit of a thing. And then maybe like another little twitch of the head. These damned cameras. Little twitchy twitch. Lovely stuff. So he goes like, oh, does a little bit of a thing. And then he's going to like, bah. Bah. His body might sort of slump a bit as well, you know. His feet might go, bah. So now our chap has, you know, he's passed out or whatever has happened. That's this particular shot. So now if we look at it, we're going to have a look. It's going to go, huh. He says, Kurr. What happens? And he's going to go, huh. And he dies. Now, one thing that you might have noticed there, look closely at Pidgey, the injured pigeon's hat. So he looks around. Grrr, do you see there was a little bit of vibration there? The reason that happened, friends, is because I foolishly forgot to make it so that this dude's hat is, so you can see it's still collidable. So it touches the ground and then freaks out. Now this is what I mentioned earlier when we were looking at particular objects, and this is why we turn off collidable and you know, no physical properties and, you know, so on and so forth. So now let's watch it again. I've turned collidable off on that hat. So ask what happens. He goes, and he dies. And there's no jitteriness with that hat. Lovely stuff. Good stuff. So one thing that you might have noticed is that the lighting there was trash. So we might turn our lighting on again. We might use slightly different lighting. So let's see here. How does it look? So from this angle, it doesn't look too bad. If we go show and hide and visibility, this is looking pretty cool. I think that lighting is still doing the job there, and I think we can actually just make it so that the lighting that we have for that first shot extends into the second shot, and that I think it looks pretty cool. No problems there. Now what I might do is add in some dialogue. So I'll go mode sound once again. Sound recording. Now this is going to be like, I don't know if it's his like sort of his mentor or like an older pigeon or whatever. He's got a hat, so you know, father figure, whatever it might be. So I've just done a bit of like an old man pigeon there. One thing I want to have is like he lifts his head, and I want it to kind of just play out like a little bit slower. So he's sort of, his head sort of goes there and then it drops, you know. So let's say like hereabouts. Yeah. Cool. So let's do it like this, and then we'll go. Bleh. So here we are. That's the sound effect he makes when he like faints or whatever. So he goes like so. Let's just have a look to see what it looks like. Kurr. Kurr. Bleh. Lovely stuff. So now what we're going to do is add in a bit more subtitles. So these subtitles are going to be like slightly different. I'm totally being an idiot with these subtitles. You'll want to, you know, actually write proper dialogue and not just bird sounds. So let's see. He asked what happened, and then the old guy's going to be like, how should I know? How should I know, bruh? And then ah man, you can't have these little starry boys. What happens if I have two? Damn. Okay, now I think the starry boys make text bold or italic or something like that. So I'm just gonna go put it in brackets. But I feel like those asterisks are a bit more memey. Anyway, meme-like. Okay. We're looking, we're testing. Bleh. Lovely stuff. So we have our first two shots. We might want to, for the sake of jitteriness. So if you look here, there's actually the slightest gap between these two cameras, and you can actually notice this when we watch. Look when the shot ends. There's kind of like the shortest moment where you can see that the workout pigeon sort of disappears for a second. So if you ever have any of these small businesses, crazy things going on, you can see it's literally one frame. So one frame is uncameraed, as it were. You can just zoom in with L1, and right on the D-pad or left on the D-pad to go back, and you just make it so that it's making contact. Lovely stuff. So now let's look again. First shot. We now have our dudes, and he dies there. And now we're going to move on to our next shot. But friends, this is basically the gist of what it takes to make a cutscene. You have your camera. Once again, we have our position, our animation, lighting, dialogue, subtitles, sound effects. Now, I've said these things a million times, and it's probably a real pain in the ear. So I think I'm going to carry on sort of making the scene just to kind of at speed, as it were, just to demonstrate the kind of things that we can do there. Alrighty, shot number 3. So for this one, I'm going to have our pigeon getting sort of like mad and upset because his friend has just like died or whatever. So I'm going to have now the position here, the position is going to be the same. He's still going to be there. But the animation is we're going to create our own little animation there. And this animation is going to be our Pidgey sort of going like, let's see, just want to grab that pelvis. Oh gosh. Or maybe he falls on his knees, you know what I'm saying? This is kind of dark. Didn't mean for this to be so dark, friends. My bad. But it's drama. There's stakes, bro. It's real life. Whoops. Okay. So I might have actually jumped the gun in this animation, so I'm going to have one where he's in his old position. And then I'm going to have one where he sort of falls to his knees. So here he sort of falls to his knees, sort of vibe. And he sort of drops his head and his body in sorrow. And I mean, this is storytelling, friends. You know, it's sad, it's dramatic. So he sort of drops. He drops to his knees. And then it's gonna go. So let's see what it looks like. Yeah. Cool. So now I've done the positioning. We can actually keep the injured pigeon's position and his animation the same, because he's basically like a static object now. He returns. Whoa. No. And in fact, if you want to not have a whole bunch of, you know, these things copied around, you can just extend the use of the workout pigeon's position, because it's still the same. Add this one here, delete that one, this one here, shwang. So now even if the camera isn't on him, the pigeon is still in his position. No. Sweet. So now for this one, I want to be a little bit funkier when it comes to the camera. So I'm going to add my camera as I would. I'm just going to put on the snap there, timeline snap, so that they're all lining up nicely. So he sort of has his like no moment when his friend is zotted. So this is going to be him, and he's like, where should we? What does it look like in the storyboard? It's not very specific, is it? Oh, we can do it like this. Cool. This is actually isn't bad. Breaking the 180 rule, but whatever. So here we are, and now we are going to have the camera position here. So we see him fall to his knees. I'll just turn off that timeline snap again. Falls to his knees. No. But while he does his like no, his head fling back, we're actually going to add a camera animation. So I'm going to go keyframe here, then another keyframe here, and this keyframe is going to draw the camera back. So I've just animated the camera by going into L1 and X, and now I'm moving it back with the left analog stick. And you can actually do dolly out zoom ins, because you could just go back and then zoom in at the same time and create the great, that vertigo effect. Anyway, for the like film nerds who are here. But anyway, I'm not going to do dolly out zoom in, but I'll just see what it looks like just for the fun. That's what happened. Oh my goodness, that dolly out was so good. So that's a dolly out zoom in. Anyway, dolly out zoom in is when you move the camera backwards, or the dolly, which is kind of like what the camera is carried by, but you zoom in at the same time. Now we're not actually going to do that. So I'm just going to de-animate the character quickly, but we are going to do a dolly out, as it were, where the camera moves backwards to sort of demonstrate the depth. You know what I'm saying? The effect there. Lovely stuff. So here we are. Once again. And that's cool, but I want it to take longer. It's too quick. It's literally less than a second that happens. So I'll maybe I'll make everything last maybe an extra second. Great to use the timeline snap for this, as always. Mess these things around, move them around, have some fun. Lovely stuff. Good stuff. And also make this last a little bit longer. So it goes, okay, let's try again. There's going to be a lot of re-watching, as you might have imagined. Awful. Way too slow. Not great. Yeah. Okay, let's do it faster. Oops. Let's do it faster. Some things just don't work, friends, you know what I'm saying? Some things you need to keep adjusting. So even when his head has reached the maximum height in terms of his animation, the camera still keeps going, which is a little bit more effective, I find. Okay, sweet. So, okay, let us then add a little bit of dialogue. This is going to be his like, oh no, I'm sad dialogue. And here we are, we're going to go, okay, dialogue. No, sorry, we're going to go sound mode. Dreams has so many tools. Gotta love all the tools in Dreams. Okay. So this is his sad sound. Lovely stuff. It's also a good idea when working with dialogue to do a little bit of a fade out. So you grab this little ball over here on the top right, and you do a bit of a fade out. So as it approaches the end, it fades out. It's also not a bad idea to not only just remove the start bits where you aren't saying anything, but you can also do a bit of a fade in. So that if there's like a bit of background noise, your PS4 fan is going crazy, it's good to use the fade in so that you can't hear that as much. Lovely stuff. And then of course, sorry, this isn't in the right layer, it should be the dialogue layer. Turn off that timeline snap so we can adjust it as we desire. And then add in the subtitles for that. And that's going to be like, no. So let's just change it so it's like, cool. Lovely stuff. No. Cool. So let us watch once again. That's pretty good. Now one question I have is, how's the lighting? So let's look at the situation. And let's go to this point in time. So as you can see here, we can actually remove the lighting there because it is a bit of a darker moment, as it were. Actually, no, that's BS. I can't believe I just said that. Okay, let's put that lighting back on. But what we're going to do to create that sense of it being a bit darker is we'll add a vignette. So we'll go, you know, to our various things. Friends, I'm sure that a bunch of you have like studied film and know all sorts of things. Because basically making a cutscene is making a movie, right? Making a short film, making a very, you know, a little short little piece of cinema. Maybe not cinema, but all of these techniques, there's tons of them, and people study them and, you know, make awesome things all the time. So I leave this very much up to you. I'm just trying to give you some examples of things that you can do. But let's go into Gradient Effects. And to create that sense of, you know, that sort of like oppressive feeling of being, of the sadness creeping in. I'm getting very English literature right now, which I did study, so that's fair enough. I'm going to create this this little Gradient Effects gadget, and I'm going to give it its very own little keyframe. So as you can see, I told you there was going to be a lot of keyframes, friends, and this is three shots, which are separated quite nicely by the cameras. That's also another reason why I use multiple cameras, because a lot of these keyframes bleed into each other, so the cameras can help you differentiate where the shots are. That's also just a pro tip. Also good reason why cameras might be at the top. Anyway, so I'm going to go about this and increase the vignette strength. Whoa. Not like too ridiculous, because right now it's actually a little bit excessive. But let's do something like this. So that's looking pretty cool. So as you can see, just adding a little bit of a vignette adds a little something. It changes the atmosphere ever so slightly. A lot of this is, you know, up to your own particular creative talents, and when it comes to gradient effects, there's tons of stuff that you can do, friends. You can change the color tinting, so like one color can appear as another. Or you can make stuff black and white, sort of a thing. You can highlight particular tones. So, for example, shadows, you know, you can change the effect of mid-tones, high tones, or highlights rather. You can change things like bloom, so like how, you know, when you look at the sun and you'll see sort of like little circles and stuff, and lens flares, and a lot of lighting-related things. So the camera is an incomplete tool without the use of gradient effects. You can of course use a camera and it'll be perfectly fine, but when you add gradient effects, then you can do all sorts of things, especially things like motion blur. If you're into that sort of stuff, you can sharpen or blur things with the use of gradient effects. You can add camera movement blur, which I haven't actually experimented with. You can add pin cushion. So let me actually just demonstrate some of these quickly. So for example, we have saturation. When it's 100%, colors are piping. They're going crazy. When it's 0%, it's black and white. Then you've got contrast, which kind of just makes colors contrast with each other more intensely. And when this is low, they kind of don't contrast with each other at all. Everything's kind of grayish. So of course, you won't really be using these to the max value. You'll be using it a little bit. And you can see that creates like a very dark and dingy, like almost comic booky vibe. And then this can create like a bit of a old school movie or like you know, old school movie vibe, because the colors aren't super differentiated, whatever it might be. And you can use these things to like do things like make characters seem a bit like, you know, if they're unwell, or from their perspective, if they're like, you know, corrupted by some sort of stuff, some like evil thing has possessed them, all these sorts of things. Brightness, of course, you know, useful if your scene is particularly dark or whatever it might be. I feel like gradient effects brightness is more for when you create like your games, and it'll be like adjusted so that you can, you know, only see these things barely or whatever. But I mean, brightness is a great feature, especially if you're making scary stuff, which I don't like, so you can't ask me a lot about that, because I'm a scaredy cat. Okay, sweet. Film grain is this and melts my eyes, and I actually kind of want to throw up now. Bloom, you won't necessarily like see if you just do like this, but kind of if you look at the sun, you see here, if you have bloom, it kind of just adds, makes stuff look a little bit cooler. If you ask me, that looks really cool, don't you think? Then you've got lens flare. Lens flare is when you have like a shiny object. So let's just go here and let's make it nice and bright. So if you have lens flare tweaked, it's basically, let me see if I can, you see how this area of the screen sort of like lights up. Do you see here? I wish I could like point to it, but you can see like here it's all green, but when I have lens flare, it's like gets a little bit of that orange. So lens flare is basically just a way of like expanding the shininess of objects in an obnoxious way. So that's what lens flare is. The grain we've already gone over. We've got blur. We've got sharpen. Blur is great for like your character's fading in and out of consciousness, or if they wake up, that sort of a thing. You know, they wake up in a particular scene. And use keyframes for this, friends. Just like as we increase the strength of the vignette, when your character's waking up, the scene could be at 100% blur, and then they sort of wake up and they're like, and then their eye sort of opens and the blur goes away, or they've been knocked out, and so on and so forth. Camera movement blur, once again, not too sure. Pincushion does this weird thing. It makes it look like a TV set. And this just makes it... Oh, I want to throw up again. So, pincushion is great for, like, if you're creating, like, a "you are now my slave, look at the camera TV, and you shall see," you know what I mean? So, pincushion is also a great feature for when you're doing, like, super meta things. Hue selectivity, I shall demonstrate. It's kind of like only certain colors will be like shown. So for example, if I do this, you'll only really see green. If I do this, you'll only really see like purplishy colors. If you do this, you'll only see reddish colors. I don't have a lot of colors in the scene, so let me just do a little bit of this. Down, bow. Here's a bit of green. I've already got green. Here's a bit of blue. Here's a bit of red, yellow. Here's a bit of red. Lovely. Here's a bit of red. So now if I use hue selectivity to demonstrate, where is it? Ah, here's it. Now you shall see the vibe. So here we are. We can only see the yellowish, then the greenish, then the bluish, and then the reddish, and a little bit of the yellow. So as you can see, like all of those things are once again useful tools. Like if you wanted to have like a character with like night vision, or predator, seeking out your target, all of that sort of nonsense. You can do that with the hue affected hue selectivity business. Now pixelation effects. I mean, great effect. If you make it tweaked fully, then everything's just pixelated. It moves on the X and the Y axis, so you can make pixels that are like super tall, or you can make pixels that are super wide. But you generally want to go up like in an even amount, so that pixels are like whatever size they are, that they're like similar-ish on the X and Y axis. Otherwise they look like rectangles and it kind of fails epically. So if it's super pixelated, yeah. But I mean, in terms of using this for cutscenes, you totally can. But use it sparingly. I would say, like, if I wanted to make it look pixelated vibes, I'd add a little bit of pixelation. And now if I play, it's like, ooh, it's a slightly pixelated vibe. And if I increase it a little bit more, it's even more pixelated. So you can definitely use this pixelation filter. But just keep in mind that it is a filter. And the further away that you move from something, the further the sort of the size of the pixel remains the same. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of pixels. So for example, if I go up super close, to this chap, there'll be tons of pixels, and you'll actually see it pretty clearly. But if I go farther away, the pixels stay the same size, so this character becomes like absolutely just by the end of it, which is of course something to consider. One thing when it comes to using pixelation effects is that text displayers don't always interact very vibing with them. So, but I actually haven't tested this in terms of the new sticker mode. So as you can see, everything is pixelated, but this chap isn't affected at all. If I, however, put him in the scene, this is very interesting. I haven't actually tested this yet. Let's just make it a bit wider. Make it so that we can rotate. Okay, cool. So if you put on sticker mode, it's going to pixelate the sticker mode business as well, which is very cool. I hadn't actually tested that out yet. Anyway, enough of pixels. Then you've got scan lines. Once again, you can really create that TV vibe. So look, I've got scan lines on, and you can also put on pincushion, and bro, you've got like a TV. You know what I'm saying? CRT all the way. So that's an example of like a sort of an effect you have. We've got posterize, which kind of like it's not a scale between like 0 and 100. It's kind of like there's kind of like different ways that you can do it. So for example, 50 and 51 aren't necessarily like these things. I mean, it does sort of scale, but I almost treat them as like 100 different ways that you can posterize. Because it creates like a different vibe, you know. So swing. And once again, this isn't really for cutscenes. I mean, you can have it for your cutscenes. It would just look very stylized. So here we have it, for example. And I mean, once again, this looks very cool. It has its own particular vibe. You must, of course, just mess around with that as you see fit. And chromatic aberration is a kind of glitch effect that makes stuff look like it's kind of... It gives it a kind of like looking at a 3D movie without 3D glasses on vibe, if you know what I mean. It kind of just blurs stuff and like adds little rainbowy effects around them. Once again, all of these are cool things that you can use. And then glitch is kind of, once again, a TV thing. It gets that vibe of like, if you go specifically on the y-axis, it's kind of like colors going funky, and then on the x-axis, then you're going to have that kind of like rewinding a TV show. So once again, we can have rewinding a TV show, scan lines, and then we can have pincushion, and we've got like a very cool TV vibe going on there. But anyway, that's enough of the gradient effects. I wanted to just go over a few of those things because all of those can improve the quality of your cutscenes and, you know, change the vibe of them depending on how you'd like them to look. So we've done a few things with lighting and gradient effects now, and I think that these shots are looking pretty sweet. Alrighty friends, now let us do a few more of the scenes at a slightly different pace. So I'm going to move this camera. This next one is going to be, so our character, our little pigeon, has been chilling. And I'm going to carry on his animations that were here. So I believe that he's green. So I'm going to make it so that this carries on. But I'll maybe change it ever so slightly. So it sort of falls forward, as it were. Leans forward, all that sort of business. Alrighty, so he goes. Now it's going to stay there. And once again, we can keep that particular lighting, because that lighting is cool. See, we are. But now what's going to happen is we're going to have our other character come in, which is the mean knight. The evil knight dude. So now we're going to add another layer onto our animation. So we're going to move lighting and gradient effects and the various keyframes that affect them. I'm going to move those down one. Or actually down two, sorry. Because we're going to have position and we're going to have animation. So now let's add in a keyframe. And this keyframe is going to be moving the knight. And I think I'm going to take the sword. And I'm going to put the sword sort of like in his hand. So I'm just going to position it like so. Maybe like so. So he's a right-handed evil knight. That's looking cool. So we have this chap, and then I'm going to go to this keyframe, move his position, so that he's now going to be kind of like hereabouts. But this is going to be kind of like a stylistic vibe. Because what I want to have is so that the camera is looking at our pigeon friend. And then what happens is, like, you're going to see the legs of the knight appear behind him. So maybe I should do it more like over here. Something like this. And then, so sweet, 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 sweet. Sorry, where did I position this dude? So yeah, he's positioned sort of hereabouts. And I'll actually make it so that where he is like here by the camera. But I'll just move him a bit. Like so. So his position is on the money. But of course I don't want him there just yet. I'm also just going to make it so that this is called baddie pose, baddie position. Lovely stuff. So it's going to be baddie position, and the color is going to be, let's say, bluish. So baddie position is there. But I'm also now going to add a little another keyframe, which is going to be his animation. And this is going to be for the first part, when the camera is here, you don't want to see his legs, so his legs are going to be like up, just out of the shot. It doesn't matter where, but just like you can't see him as of yet. And also his sword. We don't want to see his sword and stuff. Yee-hoo. So currently, he's there. His shadow is kind of ruining it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that... damn, what should we do? Now, you know what we'll do? We'll move him like here. So he'll be here to start with. And then we'll move his position sort of closer. So actually just delete this keyframe, because that just looks dumb. Okay, so for the beginning of this, his position is going to be behind the camera. And then he'll move to the position of kind of walking up to it. So it's going to be here. Pidgey's going to work out, Pigeon's going to return to his position, and then maybe about here, the position of this dude is going to change. And he's going to come closer. It's going to sort of move. That's going to be very interesting. Now, if you're looking back at a scene and you're sort of watching things over and over, what you can do is go trim start. This little arrow here, and just bring it here, so that you'll start where you want to be looking at, not the whole dang thing. See how we look? Okay, that movement was way too fast. So we're going to sort of slow it down a bit. So here we are. Let's rewind. So that wasn't too bad. Maybe once again a little bit fast. Let's look. Rewind. Cool. So that position is good. Now what I want to do is make it so that his legs sort of drop one after the other as he gets to that position. So as he gets to this position, where's he going to be? I'll first just make it so that his legs are kind of like a bit like, looks like he's walking maybe, or maybe we'll just make it so that his legs are like a little bit back. And then when he gets there, I'm just going to rename this quickly. I'm going to call this Baddie Anim. Then I'll make it so that these are all the same color. Just delete that one. Make these all the same color, that kind of bluish. Whoops. Bluish. Cool. So now he's gonna go like here. Kinda want the leg to sort of like step down, you know what I mean? So let's see what it looks like. And then it sort of like lands, you know what I mean? This will take a little bit of messing around to get the desired effect. Cool. That's the one. And then I'll go to the next leg. And put that one down as well. Swing. So it's kind of like he's standing on either side, and it's like the threatening through the leg shot. And of course we'll make this scene a lot longer, or the shot, sorry, not the scene, but the shot. Lovely stuff. Menacing. Okay, so let's see what this looks like now. So here he goes, and then that's actually not bad. That's not bad. It's very janky, but I think for the purposes of this tutorial, it's not half bad. So now I'm going to add a little bit of more dialogue here, which is going to be the knight, sort of in a bit of a threatening vibe. He's going to be like "Ruh, ruh, ruh, ruh," or something. So he does a little evil laugh. So he's got his little vibe there. Turn off this business. Whoops. Turn off this business. Add some subs. And that's going to be I'm not sure. I won't use commas. You can call it laughter or whatever. It doesn't need to be... no, that's fine actually. Okay, cool. Let's go like this. Let's see. Dish, dish. So, that is a little bit fast. So let's maybe slow this down ever so slightly. Mess around with this. Goof, goof. That's pretty good. So, I also want to add in some sound effects for when he makes those steps. So once again, when we want to add in sound effects, which we haven't actually done as of yet, we're going to go to, not effects, what am I thinking? We're going to go to sound mode, then we're going to go to search, then we're going to go to sound effects. Then we're going to go to, I think it's characters, yes, that's the one. Then you're going to look for something like footsteps, but also lands. Lands is pretty good. It's like when they land on the ground. And I know that there is like a knight footstep or like a knight somewhere here. Okay, we're going to go to lands. Actually, that grass one's not bad. There we go. That's perfect. Okay. So now we have night lands. I'm going to do one for each footstep. So, let's do something like this. Goes like so. Then we go for one that's over here as well. Now this is our gradient effects layer. So we can of course move this to a different position. I'm just wanting to get where it is in terms of this particular animation. And where it sort of lands. So let's have a look. I didn't hear nothing. Oh, you know why I didn't hear anything? Is because a lot of sound effects actually have this, and that's 3D panning. So 3D panning makes it so that sounds are only heard within a specific radius. If your character, as you'll be able to see here with fade zone, just increase that. So you'll see here, because the pink box is over here, it's emanating the sound from that location. So we don't want 3D panning for this particular, for cutscenes. In cutscenes, 3D panning, not the one. I mean, for some things, sure. You know, if you want to have like left and right sound vibes. But you generally want to turn 3D panning off so that the sound plays and it has a specific volume. 3D panning is great for when you're like creating sounds for the particular scene. Like for your game, and you want it so that if you're further away from, like, you know, a box exploding, that you don't hear it as loudly. But for a cutscene, we want things to be, we want to be able to hear it. So there we have just a little bit of sound effects and so on and so forth. And I mean, that's looking pretty cool, friends. So now we have a multi-scene thing, or multi-shot thing. We've got 4 shots. Kurr. Kurr. Bleh. Kurr. So now we have like our stakes, we have loss, we have, you know, various camera effects and stuff. But friends, in terms of designing a cutscene, there's really not much more for me to teach you. I'm going to quickly go over these various elements so that you can make cutscenes yourselves. But really, it's just a continuation of this, and it is very time consuming, and it is fairly complex because you're keeping multiple things in mind. Also, you'll want to make sure that this chap is all the way there, so his body doesn't just disappear between shots. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And so here we have cameras to begin with. We have cameras over here. We have the blocking in terms of position and animation for all of our various characters. It's good to color code these so you know what's going on. We've got dialogue, we've got subtitles, which are important. We've got animation of cameras. We have lighting, which you can do with, like, you know, all sorts of paint strokes and so on and so forth. We have gradient effects, and we have sound effects, not just like background noise, you know, ambient sound effects, but like actual, like, you know, Foley kind of stuff, you know, tapping on floors and, you know, like opening doors and those sorts of things, and other things that don't rhyme. But yes, friends, that's pretty much all there is to making a sort of classic cutscene, and there you are. Let us add a interactive section to our cutscene, and that's going to be kind of a little quick time event. So let me describe it to you. The knight is going to like raise his sword, like he's going to attack, like roar, and then you'll have a certain amount of time to press a button, and if you press that button in time, then what's going to happen is it's going to take you to a cutscene where you sort of like dodge the attack, or like punch him in the face or some such thing. And if you don't press it in time, then it's going to be like, ugh, you'll get like hit with the sword or whatever it might be, game over, all that sort of stuff. So I think let us get stuck in with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to this particular vibe that we've got here, and we're going to just sort of use the trim start to make it so that we're only looking at the part that's of most importance to us at the moment. We're going to extend this chap outwards like so. And so what we've got up until this point is this dude like raises his sword and it's all crazy. And now I'm going to basically I'm going to lengthen this so that our chap is there for a longer time. And I'm going to change the animation so that now he's basically got like a raised sword. So I'm going to make it so that he goes like, he's going to have like a raised up sword. He's going to be sort of looking menacing. So I actually want him to be in this position before the camera is on him. So instead of doing a transition, like a blend between these two, I'm actually going to move it so that it's right here. So as we get to this line, which is the 15-second mark, and we add in a new camera, it's actually going to be swing. It's going to be lined up perfectly here. Let's zoom in close to the frame level with L1 and right on the D-pad. And yes, we can see that it's touching and it's perfect there. Lovely stuff. Might zoom in a bit more over there. And we basically want to make it so that it's almost like slow-mo for the sort of duration of the QuickTime event. That's going to be like kind of a slow-mo thing of him like raising up his sword. And in that time, you have the ability to press the dodge button, for example, circle. So it's going to be like, over the course of this little animation, he like raises his hand up more and more. So it's going to be like, so this camera is going to be looking at this dude like so. Can be from like a slightly lower perspective. We can also make it so that our Pidgey is in position, so we can see where he is. So we could do like an over-the-shoulder sort of camera angle vibe. So let's see where he is. Yeah, we can do it like so. Now we're going to also change his animation, so that in his animation he's going to be sort of like looking over his shoulder like, whoa, what's going on? Alrighty. And once again, it's going to be not actually sort of as soon as it happens, not as soon as we move to the shot, because Pidgey's going to be in his previous thing where he was kind of like looking sad, but now he's going to look over his shoulder and sort of turn his body a bit. We can of course go into our camera to see what it's going to look like. That looks pretty good actually. So he's going to look over his shoulder, also in kind of slow motion. And the difference between something being like fast or normal speed and slow motion is of course the amount of frames it is. So if it happens like this, the pigeon's just going to look over his shoulder. But if you do it like this, it's going to take him 3 seconds or so to do it, and it's going to be basically look more slow-mo. So if we check this out, it's going to be like, huh? Oh, sorry. This pigeon dude that's over here is kind of messing with it, so we can actually just sort of make it so that he's not there anymore. Okay, let's try. We rewind. Okay, sweet. What I might do here is sort of like slow it in the beginning, so it turns and he sees the guy, and then we see he's starting to swing, and then basically as he approaches this sort of region, that's when it's going to be like, ooh, it's time to press the particular QuickTime event. So now to make this a QuickTime event, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Moves and Output, grab ourselves a dialog text displayer, and we're going to put that down at the section where we want to be like, cool, from this point you can then dodge. So we're going to go to this text displayer. We're going to just press triangle in the main text, so it's just a space. Then we're going to go over to the dialog properties, which is like the little speech bubbles. And for circle, you're going to type in the word dodge. So when you put text in here, it basically makes it so that the dialog text gadget is like, okay, sweet. Now, so if someone presses circle, it's going to be an output and it's going to do something. Even if the camera's disabling controllers, this will still work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to delete, or we're going to turn off the text box. We're going to turn off the border. We're going to turn off the shadow. We aren't too interested in that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to press L1 and X on the camera, and we're going to reposition the dodge so that it's a bit more noticeable. Swing. We can of course change the color of the, we can change the font, swishing, so it's a bit more noticeable. Swishing, whatever it might be. If you do want to have the text box on, you can. You've just got to do something like, I don't know, put the main text box so it looks a bit off screen, so it's not in the way there. And then let's say it's like the text is maybe rather just black with this sort of vibe. So there we are. So now if this appears, it's going to be like, huh? And we're going to have circle to dodge. But not only that, we want to make it so that it's kind of a timed kind of event. So you can press circle to dodge, but you're also only going to have so much time to do so. So what we're going to do for that, to give ourselves like a little bit of a countdown, is we're going to add in another text displayer. So once again, move as an output and get ourselves a text displayer. This one can also be here. Now I am kind of crossing over into the lines of where the lighting and stuff is. So if you want to, you can of course move these things into their own region. It's not a huge deal if you have multiple things in the same lane, but if you want to, for consistency, make sure that everything has its own lane and nothing goes in there that shouldn't be there. It's a good idea just for the sake of consistency, and you know, if other people look at it and want to understand it. So we're going to go to a text displayer, press triangle to add a space in here. Then we're going to go to text box properties and turn off autofit. Make it a little bit smaller. And now I'm just going to look at this one and make it so that they kind of line up. I'm going to turn off the shadow. And I'm going to make the border a bit thicker. You can go border width here. And then I'm also going to make it so that the inside is green. Lovely stuff. Then I'm going to copy this. And this one is going to be, I'm going to make it so that the text box is black. And that it is slightly behind the first one. So for sort order you can put on, I think you put it, let me just, okay, wait, you make the sort order of this one 0. So when they're all displayed, you're going to see this one on top. Then what you're going to do is, you've got, this is kind of like the timer, think of it. This one's going to get smaller like so. And when you run out of time, the quick time event is over and you get smacked. So, and this is the sort of background. So now, as I put this keyframe on, this keyframe is going to be like, okay, cool, that's looking sweet. But as time moves along, you're eventually going to run out of time, and this quick time event is going to be over. And if it gets all the way to the end, then basically you're in trouble. So let's give a bit of a demonstration. So it goes, so you have that much time to dodge, and we want to make it so that if you dodge, one cutscene plays, you do a nice dodge, and if you don't do it in time, you're going to get smacked. I think the border on this is a little bit thick actually on the first one, so I'm just going to disable that so the border isn't on here, but if you see them together, it's going to actually look good. So let's actually just look. So it's not the best design ever, if I'm honest. We might want to sort of go to this chap and maybe make it so that this text box is also autofit turned off, and we'll just, we don't want that guy. He can go away. But this one we might. Oh, you can't actually adjust this one. Okay, that's fair, I suppose. You might want to move it slightly down or something so that it doesn't sort of overlap too much with this. Anyway, we try again. So basically, if you run out of time, then it's not going to be winning. Also, you might see that, of course, like we can kind of see our characters here and like our pink box in the background. So the pink box, we're actually going to have it as invisible by default. And you can also make it so that we do want, of course, that logic still to be open. We want the pink box to be sort of like invisible by default. And if these guys are getting in the way a bit, or they're sort of in this particular part of the scene we don't want to see them, then what you can do is add in a keyframe over here. And in this keyframe you can either make these characters invisible, or you can just move them out of the particular shot. So you could be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna move them over here, so you can't see them. Or of course a much easier option is just to say, sweet, for this part these guys are invisible. Sweet. And of course you're going to want to drag that keyframe so that it's for the duration of that shot. And you can say background, let's just say BG for background invis. So now the characters in the background that have sort of, made it into the frame just because of the particular way that the camera is facing, we can't actually see them anymore in this shot. So let's do a quick demonstration. We only have so much time to dodge. And now let us work this logic in. So we want to now make it so that the character dodges if all goes well. So we'll take our particular cutscene that we've got, and we might actually make a copy of it, and basically just like, well, actually maybe not a copy of it. Let's make a fresh cutscene just so that we aren't messing around with anything. Okay, so we've got a fresh one, and in this one, we can copy some sort of the poses and whatnot, so that we have these things in the right sort of position. So we can copy these dudes. This is the pose frame and the animation frame. So this is going to be where the roll is happening. So I'll say like dodge success. So now we're going to animate the dodge success little timeline animation. But friends, one key thing to remember when you're animating anything, but if you're animating on a timeline, you need to make sure that no other timelines are currently activated. Because if, for example, I start animating here, but this timeline is still on, well, then Pidgey, or Workout Pigeon, is going to be affected by multiple keyframes. As you can see here, if you click on your character with X, you can see all the keyframes that are sort of affecting them. And of course this is just the position of the character, so if I go L1 and X on this, so if I just go X, you can see these ones are changing his position. If I do this and I go into him, you can see there are even more. You see all the sort of keyframes that are sort of pulsating at the moment. Those ones are all affecting him simultaneously. So it's important when we're doing a new animation that you quickly turn off that one. Lovely stuff. So now let's add a bit of a dodge roll vibe over here. So this is our Pidgey's position. What we're going to do is we're going to move Pidgey from, he's going to be sort of in one position and then he's going to be in another. So nice and simple, we'll just go zweep, put him sort of over here. We can even sort of rotate him if we like. Swing. So let's have a look at what this looks like. Here. So that's not bad. And now what we're going to want to do is give him like a roll animation. So his position gets moved from A to B. That's cool. He goes, waha. And now what we want to do is make it so that his animation is believable. So the last position he was in, he was sort of looking over his shoulder, as I believe. So now what he's going to do is we're going to quickly grab his pelvis. he's going to sort of get up on one knee. Swing. He's going to get up on his knee. Or on both of his knees maybe. He's going to turn a bit. He's going to go, huh, as you can see there. We can also turn off the cameras there for a second. So he gets up on his knees. And then he's going to sort of jump forward. So he's going to go, hua. You lift up his pelvis. His one leg is going to fly out. His other leg will maybe like come in like so. And we basically want to make it so that he like does a bit of a roll. So you can tuck his head in. And start to tuck in his sort of chest as well. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see with all these cameras about. So we go here. So he goes here. Lovely stuff. Then you can see the rotation is already happening because of what we've done with the workout pigeon position. And that's looking cool. That's looking very cool. Well, it might be hard to get his pelvis there, so I'm just going to move this a bit. Lovely. Okay, cool. So now he's going to do a bit of a forward flip. Now, friends, if you want to do like a nice roll or move your character about, you'll often see that the feet or the hands might sort of stick in one position that isn't quite the vibe. So what you want to do is you'll grab the foot and you'll say IK to FK and the other foot and IK to FK as well. You can only do this when you're selecting one body part or animated element at a time. So for example, if I did this, that sort of feature disappears. But now they're kind of locked into position based on the joints rather than on that position of that specific element. So now if I rotate him, yeehaw, the feet will come with. Lovely stuff. So let's give our workout pigeon like a bit of a nice roll there. We can adjust this. Shwang, shwang. Okay, so now we have a pretty decent looking animation, and what we're going to make happen is I might make it like a little bit faster, so I'll maybe just have these chaps a little bit closer together. So it happens just half a second faster. So let's see here, here. And as you can see, friends, this is where it really shines to have the position and the animation separate, because now I can make it so that, for example, he gets there really quickly, or that he gets there kind of like a little bit slower, or you can really just mess around with it. It looks like he almost slides a bit. So imagine having the information of the puppet's position tapped into every single one of these keyframes as well. You'd be animating their sort of the physical body, doing the roll, and also their position. And what that would look like is, it would look like instead of a smooth animation over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames or something, it would be 5 points, and at each point there's a different animation. I hope that makes sense. So it basically this makes it smoother, because the movement is being animated as one thing, and the character's body parts doing their particular poses is animated as something different. So that's just an example of something that's pretty cool. So now he does his dodge success, and not only that, we're also going to have our baddie in the position as well, and with his particular pose, but the sword's going to come down, you know what I mean? So for this animation, let's just see. So it's going to be like here. So he's going to dodge. So the sword is going to come to this kind of a position. Let's get his arm sort of thereabouts. And then we're going to make it so that his arm comes down to, let's move his pelvis and his sort of upper body. And the sword's going to come down where Pidgey is sort of by default. The little pigeon is. Goosh. Lovely stuff. Goosh. So now it's gonna be like here. Fwing. Might even move it a little bit closer so that it looks like it's very close between this slice. Maybe that's a little bit too close. You can of course mess around with these animations. So now it goes here. Swishing. Swishing. So that's looking pretty dope. You can adjust, you can have fun. Swishing. Okay, so he's gonna be like, so here. So that's a little bit slow if you ask me. So I'm gonna move these once again just a little bit closer to each other. A little bit like so. I mean, it doesn't need to be super fast because we can sort of say that it's kind of in slow motion. It will look like this. Here. Here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually add in a camera. So we're not going to copy one. I mean, you can copy one, but remember what I had said in the beginning. When you move one camera from one position to another, well, actually this one's fine, but if you move it from one like microchip to another or move that around, it can go a little bit crazy. So we're going to go like so. Swishing. But make sure that you move this camera from one timeline to another, because if you put the camera like over here or something, it could sort of, as you can see, end up in a different position, which is not the vibe. So let's put this camera in its rightful place at the top over here. And now let's see if we do this and we play. Ooooh. So that's pretty cool, but I want it to be more like here. So that you can see it sort of coming down. Let's play. Ooooh. Not quite what I'm looking for. Not quite. Maybe a little bit over here. Here. I want to see the like sword sort of falling, you know what I'm saying? Ooooh. Maybe still this. I still want my chap to be like the sort of focal point. Maybe like this. Nice, that's a pretty good dodge. I think that's not too bad. Hooah! So you really get that sense of him getting out of the way just in time. Okay. So this dodge success is looking like a pretty cool timeline. Nice little animation. And then I'm also going to have like the dodge fail basically. So I'm gonna copy this one. I'm gonna say dodge fail, or QTE fail because you fail the QuickTime event. And it's basically, we can delete all this. He's gonna stay in that one position. And it's gonna be like, he'll maybe like turn. So let's make it sort of, let's grab the original one, so workout pigeon anim. We'll grab it there, but we'll make it a bit smaller. So it'll basically be like, maybe something like this. Something ominous. So something a little bit ominous. sort of over the shoulder of this dude, and it's going to be like, yeah. We'll sort of change the angle of it so that it kind of looks like it's going to hit him. But don't worry, we're going to sort of fade out before it actually hits them. So it's going to be this one. So all those others are off. It's going to be like... Dang, that's kind of hectic. Let's keep his sort of body a little bit out of the way, because it was a little bit in the way there. Whoops. Dodge success was playing as well. So let's turn off dodge success. Alrighty. Oh my gosh, that's so hectic. Okay, so he's gonna turn. It's gonna be a little bit. It's gonna be a little bit more of a pause. That's gonna be like. Huh? And then like just before it hits, basically. So when we get to the at like this stage, the chicken is done for. So it's gonna be like we're gonna have like a nice the end or game over or something. Game over. So it's going to be game over. That's going to be nicely in the, not in the scene, sorry, but in the middle. And it's going to be text box, auto fit vibes, game over. Shwang, we'll make it nice and big. And it'll be a black background with white text. Game over. Lovely. Okay, so as you get to that point, it's going to be game over. But not only that, friends, we're also going to add in a splat effect, so that it's gruesome. So we go sounds, we go tools, we go sounds, we go search, we go sound effects, we go to the sound effects, and now, let me just think, I think it's in explosions, or explosions. It's a bunch of different sort of splatterfest, that's the one. Okay, so if this one plays, ah, nasty, bro, nasty. I deeply regret making this. Okay. So now we have... It's actually so awful. Okay. So now, let us... We've got dodge success, and we have cutscene. Dodge success, dodge fail. So now we want to add this, like, we want to add some logic to make it so that we can now have, like, a quick time event that works when we have... like basically animated all of these things. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a counter, logic and processing, grab ourselves a counter. I'm actually going to need 3. So the first one, it's going to be target value is 1 and its current count is going to be 1. So by default, cutscene number 1 is going to be playing. Make sure that playback mode is sustain. Lovely stuff. So basically what happens for this one is, if it gets to the end of this cutscene, on end trigger, it's going to do dodge fail. So in other words, if it plays all the way to the end being when that little bar like runs out, then what's going to happen is it's going to trigger the dodge fail and it's going to be game over. We're also going to make it so that this triggers this and it's going to, you know, activate dodge fail. And then we're also going to want to make it so that this is no longer active, because of course at the moment it's going to be active. So in order to make it no longer active, what we're going to do is we're going to add in a node, which you can find on the right of logic and processing. So by default the counter is 1, the first cutscene plays, and then if time elapses and we haven't pressed the dodge button in time, it's going to take us to the dodge fail. When it goes to dodge fail, it's going to activate this node, which we're going to make a no port node, so there aren't any wires sort of sticking out. and the no port node is going to make it so that reset count. So this is no longer active, so those keyframes aren't going to be active anymore, but this one will be. Now, how do we make it so that dodge? Well, what we're going to do for that is we're going to make it so that when the circle button is pressed, so on our dialog text display, when the circle button is pressed, then it is going to add 1 to the count. And when 1 is added to the count, it's going to play dodge success. When dodge success is played, it's also going to, or when this is played, sorry, when the counter is full, it's also going to deactivate this. Because we want to make it so that if you have dodge success, it stops this cutscene dead in its tracks, because if it keeps playing, it's going to take us to dodge fail. So I'll just sort of try and arrange this a bit better. So here we have our various counters. If nothing happens, it will lead to a fail. When it fails, it's going to reset the counter. Just gonna sort of add a little bit of gritty vibes to this, so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. Lovely stuff. So if nothing happens, we fail in this animation, not in life. And then if we press, let me actually just minimize this so we can see where all the wires are. If we press circle in time, if we press the circle button, it's going to activate the dodge success counter. Move that over here. So we're going to have success, like so. Good enough for me. And then this one is also going to activate this node. And what this node does is, of course, it deactivates cutscene 1. So end 1, let's say. Lovely stuff. So now we have our cutscene, and let's see if it works. So I'm going to play it just from where we put the start timer. We sort of moved that, or the trim start. So it goes from here. Oh no, I'm not going to press anything. And of course we get munched. The dodge thing is still showing up there. But anyway, I'll look into that in a second. I just want to see if the successful dodge works. Huh? Circle. Switching. So now it works, friends. Okay, friends, so now we've seen that it works nicely. But of course, if we fail the dodge, you know, the QTE is there, it's looking good, but then the dodge text stays, which isn't vibing. Because what we really want is to make it so that it disappears. You don't have the option anymore. Our logic is already has our back. It already disables it so that the text displayer can't actually do anything. The dialog text display, even if you press circle. So for example, here I am. That's looking cool. I don't press circle, and then I press it too late. It sort of disappears, but the logic's not going to actually make it activate the dodge success because it's already too late. So this is kind of a little bit of the jankiness when it comes to dialog text displays. And actually, even if you change the length of this chap, the text is still going to stay around until you press a button. So I'm just going to make it so that it doesn't extend continuously. So if, for example, here you see it loses its edge, that means it'll sort of keep playing. I'm just going to make it so that it has its edge again. But I'm also going to do basically what I call the out of sight, out of mind strat. Not the best, but it's a little bit of a workaround for the jankiness of this text displayer. Because these text displayers don't elapse. They don't end. Unless, of course, they do, and I'm just stupid. If they do, please, you know, let us know in the comments how you deactivate these things without pressing them. But as far as I'm aware, it's not possible. But this is one option. So this will deactivate the, so we can say deac dialog, or deac QTE text. Deactivate QTE text. We can put it on keep changes. So now let's try again. Oh no. Now I'm mashing circle, nothing happens. we might want to make it not so long, make it kind of just only appear at the end, so that it's not sort of disappearing randomly. So that is one option, friends. You can do that. But if you have multiple cutscenes in which the not pressing of buttons is actually an integral part of it, you could make it so that if you don't press the button, it's game over. Or it might be if you don't press the button, you lose health, a certain amount of health. So not all of these situations are going to be beneficial when it comes to using a janky dialogue text displayer. So something else that you might do, friends, is grab yourself a controller sensor. So you're going to gadgets, get yourself a controller sensor. This might seem a bit strange to some of you. I'm just going to delete all of these connections, and I'm going to go to possession properties and go remote controllable. So now, whoopsie, now I'm going to take this here. I'm just going to deactivate this chap, so we don't want him anymore. And I'm going to use the controller sensor, and I'm going to make it so that when the controller sensor presses circle, then it will also be a dodge success. What? Sorry, I don't know if I actually connected it there. Going to connect circle to the, whoops, connect circle to the dodge success counter. So let's try this one out. So the problem is that it's not going to show you the text. So if I press circle, ching, dodge success, hooray. So that's cool. The only thing that you must do if you use the remote controller strat is you'll need to make your own little text display text. So this strat is useful in terms of, for example, you want to have a quick time event, or basically a like even a spoken event where you have a certain amount of time to say something. So if you don't say something, then it's going to cause an event as well. So typical sort of dialogue text displays, how they work is that, let's just move that down a bit, increase the size of it ever so slightly. You can turn that off, or maybe just change the color of it. So if we have all of these active, okay, turn that one off. Cool, we can arrange it like so. Dodge. Sorry, I've got kind of like stick drift on my motion sensor, as you can see. Yeah, I'm not moving my controller. It's a little bit annoying. Anyway, so here we have dodge. So now this strat is we make our own controller sensor with remote controllable on. We also make our text displayer have sort of demonstrate the dodge sort of thing going on there. And this makes it so that we don't have to deal with the jankiness of text displayers. So overall, this strat is heavier on thermo because you've got a controller sensor, which is more thermo than a dialog text displayer, I believe, and another text displayer itself. But it is, you have more control and it's less janky. When this thing ends, this will no longer be displaying. So I don't really use dialog text displayers myself. I'll generally go for something like this. Just because it's a bit more versatile. But if you have scenes where you can only press A, B, or C, and there's no timeout effect, in other words, nothing happens if you don't press it in a certain amount of time, then the text display is absolutely perfect. And if you're worried about, ooh, mean lad brew, how do I pause it so that the character doesn't, do anything until you choose the event? Well, that's fine. All you have to do is delete the connection here that's on end trigger, and it's on sustain. So for example, you'll set it to sustain. So that means it's going to pause at the moment where it says it's time for the decision to be made or the dialogue option to be chosen. By adding the on end trigger thing that I did over here, it basically just makes it so that when this is finished in terms of time, those 3 seconds or 4 seconds, whatever it is, have elapsed, then it does something. But you don't actually have to have that at all. So for dialogue options, delete the on-end trigger and just have multiple options coming out depending on the button that's pressed. But yes, if you want to have a QTE that has a timeout function, use the remote controllable controller sensor and then a little text box. So now let's try again. Yeah. So I forgot that because I copied that one text box, this animation is actually affecting it as well. So I'll just de-animate that quickly. That was kind of funny. So let's see here. Dodge, swing. That's looking nice. I might actually also, just for the sake of, you know, longevity or continuity rather, make sure that his body is still there in either event. But yes, friends, so in terms of QuickTime events, we have now figured it out. We now know how to have multiple outcomes. One's based on a button press for like the dodge success here, so it's connected to the circle on the text displayer, dialog text displayer, or the controller sensor. It'll take us there. If we don't press anything, on-end trigger will activate and cause our dodge fail. So that's how you have a QTE. And now for the sake of continuity, I'm just going to paste in the injured pigeon. I'm going to paste in the injured pigeon keyframes just to these dudes so that he's still sort of like in the background, even if he's just lying down. Sorry, let's do that. Cool, and then the same for this guy. So we can still see the injured pigeon. Sorry, I'm not really obeying my one lane per thing rule, but just to sort of demonstrate. Here. Oh no, now it looks like he hits the pigeon that's down. Anyway, that's fine. Okay, now let's see this. And dodge fail. Oh no! Oh, that is rough, bro. Dang, dudes. Okay. But ultimately, what have I made? What a horrible creation is this? I'm just going to make it so that when the baddie hits, he's actually going to miss. He's not going to hit the dude that's already been clapped. He's already been clapped, you know. He's already down, bro. That's not cool. Okay, let's see how this looks. Ooh. We dodge. Okay. It kind of doesn't look like he's hitting him anymore. That's fine. That's cool. Alrighty, friends. I mean, this is looking pretty sweet. One thing just came to mind now, as I was just sort of reviewing this. With the controller sensor strat, which as we sort of discussed is a more versatile one, a little bit less janky, just keep in mind that if you go into your cameras and you're using the disable controller sensor input, the strat isn't going to work. So, because of course it's going to disable this controller sensor just like it would any other one. So if you're going to be using this camera strat to disable controls, then the dialog text displayer is the way to go. If, for example, you want to do what we've done, which is use the controller sensor, then you're going to want to go with the depossess and don't allow imps strat. Yeah, so just there's kind of two ways to do things, two ways to disable controls, two ways to interact with cutscenes, with QuickTime events and stuff, dialogues and so on and so forth, and they sort of match with each other. So just once again in summary, the camera controller disable goes well with the dialogue text displayer, and the depossession and the disallow imps goes well with the remote controller sensor strategy. Alrighty. So friends, just to put the last sort of nail in the proverbial coffin, I'm going to just go over just a very brief demonstration of how to use a text displayer, a dialogue text displayer for like multiple choice, like, you know, spoken choice options. So what I'm going to do is at the end of the dodge success, I'm going to put in another one, and I just want to do this to make sure that you are 100% on how to use dialogue text displayers. I feel like I spoke about it briefly, but I want to also just demonstrate to you. Okay, so when we are doing our dialogue text displayer vibe, we're going to go into our timeline. We're just going to go into our latest one, so for example our dodge success, and this one is going to have dialogue text displayer here at the end. So after you successfully dodge, he's going to be chilling here. So this one is going to be, I'll say like next action, for example. Next action. So this isn't really dialogue, but I mean it's serving the purpose of dialogue, or, you know. Basically what I'm showing you here is an event that won't progress until you choose an option. So a quick time event is an event that will progress whether you act or not. If you don't act, it'll be kind of a negative effect or whatever, and if you do act, it'll be a positive effect, or, you know, that's kind of contingent. But what we're demonstrating here is what happens when you have like an event that pauses the whole scene. So I'm just going to look at the camera again. So I think he ends up about here. So I'm going to go next action, sort of bottom lefty. And then over here, I'm going to say, let's say like square is punch. And then triangle can be like kick. And then let's say X is, I don't know, headbutt. Cool. So now we have 3 distinct options, and it's going to go there. And because of the nature of our timeline is set to sustain, and our counter powers it constantly. Because that's how counters work. As soon as they've got the positive thing, they're going to power it constantly. So let's go here. It appears, we dodge, shwang, and now it's like, wah, what's your next action? And as you can see now, the game is paused. No matter how long I take, it's going to say, what's your next action? And I'm going to say, okay, cool, am I going to headbutt him? Am I going to punch him, or am I going to kick him? So I must basically choose one of these. So I just pressed circle then and sort of closed it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have all of these different outcomes related to a specific little timeline of their own. So this is going to get a little bit bigger. And remember, friends, no matter how much you want to be like, ooh, there's a lot of stuff going on here, let me move it into a microchip. Don't move these things into a microchip or out of this microchip and into another one, because you'll break all of your cameras and who knows what else. So just trust me. Don't be like, ooh, I want to neaten this up and just move it into another. Don't do it, friends. Anywho. So, okay, cool. We're going to take our counters, and in our dodge success dialogue vibe over here, we now have 3 options. So if the character headbutts, so let's have 3 counters. Cool. So we're going to have headbutt, we're going to have punch, I'm going to have kick. So imagine the narrator is asking you, what is your next option, or what is your next action? You're going to do one of these 3 things. When one of these 3 things has been activated, before we get to the timeline in terms of the actual animations of what they're going to do, we're going to add another node, and this node is going to end 2. So we're going to, all of these are going to power this node, and this node is going to make it so that, think of this counter as the first event, these counters are the second event, and these counters are the third event. So when we get to the second event, we want to no longer power the first event. We don't want to have those keyframes interrupting us or anything. Similarly, when we get to this event, the third sort of event, we want to end the second one, because we don't want these chaps to be messing with the third event. So make sure that you end the event, the previous event, before you move on to the next one. Lovely stuff. So what we're going to do to end the event is, of course, just reset the count. We don't have to do it with this one, because if you dodge fail, then it's a game over. You also want to add a doorway if you want it to be like a game over, you know, at the end there. But so let's continue here. So we've got our sort of end node, and that's looking pretty cool. In terms of lining up the wires, I'll just do something very cursory. Sweet. So now if we do this, it's going to end this particular event, and we're not going to have to worry about all sorts of business. You can make one to connect to the dodge fail if you wanted to, for the sake of like consistency, but there's no need to do so in this situation. But of course, similarly, if we had a 4th event, we need another node that reset the count on all of these counters. Alrighty. So now let us make a... Now, I've done a lot of animating today, and this video is probably like 4 hours long now. So what I'm going to do here is add in a camera. Hooah! And this camera is going to be looking at this dude's face, because I'm going to be like, I don't know, punching him or something, or doing all the various things. Swish, swish, swing. Then what is this? This is headbutt, right? Yeah, headbutt. So also this is pretty useful. You can see what you can see on the output what the buttons are and what the text is. Great output function. God love Dreams. God love MM. Attention to detail is just next level. Okay, sweet. So here we are. We put down a keyframe, and in this keyframe, this is where we're going to headbutt. And should I break this up into position and, you know, animation and all these various things? Undoubtedly, friends, undoubtedly. But right now, am I going to do that? Heck to the no. One thing, though, is I must actually quickly just deactivate this counter, because we're going to need to move the pigeons based on their base position, not their contingent position that is affected by that. So make sure that as I said sort of earlier, make sure all the other timelines are turned off so that you're not having multiple things sort of happen. Although, dang, now I don't know where these dudes were. So let me copy their last known keyframes, as it were, from Dodge Success. So this is where the workout pigeon was, and this is where the baddie was. Yeah, I should be making, you know, multiple layers and so on and so forth, but I've done this many times, and I feel like you get the picture now. So I'm going to alter not only his position, but also his animations with the same keyframe. Okay, sweet. So he's going to be like headbutting this dude. But I also change the angle of it slightly so you can just see it a bit more clearly. Even if it breaks the angle ever so slightly. Let's do a mirror and then get these feet. Ooh, they're not exactly lined up very well, are they? Okay, that's cool. And then the baddie's position is here, but we're going to make it so that his head sort of goes a bit back. What's this? What's this? What is this weirdly rotating head here? What is going on here? Oh, I've got mirror snap on. Well, not mirror snap, but just mirror. Whoo! Then I'll also take his visor and go, oosh. Oh yeah, mates, I built some crazy vibes here. Ooh, so he's gonna be like that. Maybe his one arm's up or something, you know. My dude is getting shreked. Okay, sweet. So I might just change the workout pigeon's position, so it's a little bit more in line here. So cool, that's cool. Just gonna change that camera a little bit here. So if we go goosh, just gonna look at that. Okay. Doesn't want to thingy, because I've connected it to everything already. Let me just delete that connection to that counter, so I can just see where everything is. Ooh. Goosh. Lovely. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to add sound effects or whatever. Oh, you guys know how to do that. Okay, cool. And this is going to be that one. I'll call this just 1 for the first option. Cool. And then I'll have the second option. And this one will be like exactly the same for all intents and purposes, except this one is going to be, I think, the punch. Or was it the kick? Quickly minimize that. Let's see. So the second one is... Get rid of this recorder. Second one is punch. Okay, cool. Workout pigeon is going to be doing a punch now. So let's change his position. Let's have like one leg up, the other one back. Ah, frick, he can't punch, he doesn't have any damn hands. Okay, well, let's make it peck. Yeah. We'll make it peck. You know, I had a whole thing planned where like this pigeon was going to turn into like the buff pigeon and all of that, but that storyboard was 17 frames or something, and this one's 5, and yeah, I'm just tired. So let me change it. So instead of punch, it's going to be peck. Lovely stuff. So now we've got peck. That's looking great. I don't know what I'm doing. Don't know why I played it. Okay, cool. So this is number 2. So if you press peck, it's going to do that. And last but not least, of course, we're going to have this one. Oh, the position of this node is not very smart. Okay, anyway, we're going to have this one. This one's going to be number 3, the third option, which is, of course, kick. And this one will also be quite cool. It's going to be like, sweet, let me reset those foot positions. Reset that. Might adjust it so it's like so. Now let's go in here and get those legs stretching. Dun, 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 dun. Alrighty. Let's do a bit of this, a bit of rotation, a little bit of bending, a bit of this, you know what I mean? You know exactly what I mean. You know exactly what I mean when I'm talking about that foot position. Swing! That's like the classic kick pose, you know what I'm saying? Ooh. Cool. So now we have our 3 various things. And as you can see here, you just make it so that when you have your dialogue text displayer, you connect each of those outputs to their own counter. Each of those counters is connected to their own timeline. And of course, you know, you can have a whole timeline just like one of these, with like a whole new bunch of animations and more dialogue things. You just sort of can have all sorts of iterations, however you pronounce it, just sort of branching off like this. You just remember when you do these things that you need to deactivate the previous event, the previous event's counter, so that you aren't having multiple things, because the counter makes it so that if it's on sustain, the last frame, and all of these things are going to be active in the last frame if it's set to sustain. So just make sure that you deactivate those counters, and by deactivating them I just mean resetting the count so that they're no longer active. Lovely stuff. So let us now try it out. I'm just going to reactivate this one over here. So we do our thing. Hurrah, dodge. Wha-cha-cha. That's going to ask next action. I'm going to say headbutt. Wha-cha. Lovely stuff. Let's rewind and see the next dialogue option. Hurrah, dodge again. Swing. Next I'm going to go with peck. Cha-ching. Looking good. So the cameras here are smooth transitioning instead of cutting, which is fine. But you know, now we'll do kick. Whoogish. This is just to demonstrate not the smoothness of the like animation, but just how to get your dialogue text displayer situation going. So what we've done so far in this tutorial, friends, we've gone over a cutscene, and we're just gonna trim start and set that at the beginning again. So what we've done is we've gone over blocking, position, animation, camera, lighting, which of course is our little square that we have here somewhere. Lighting, you can do all sorts of stuff with that, it's a lot of fun. Any paint stroke, you don't have to just use a square fleck. After lighting, we've added dialogue, we've added subtitles, very important for accessibility, friends. We've added background noise, We've also added here, not in the right sort of channel as it were, but we've added some sound effects. We've added some grade and effects. So that's the vignette. And we've also shown you how to do quick time events. So with quick time events, there's two options. You can use dialog text displayers, but really the best option is to have controller sensors. Controller sensors are great because they're a little bit more versatile. So that's the first thing that we've sort of gone over in terms of animation. Don't forget, of course, about our setup where we disable the procedural animation and we disable the physical stuff. By this I mean movement and collision. And, of course, depossession. In other words, we make it so that puppets can't be possessed when these cutscenes are playing, so that we aren't controlling them by accident. Then once we have got our QuickTime event, if time runs out, it's going to take us to one event. In other words, on end trigger, time is going to run out and it's going to dodge fail. If you press the correct button, which is the circle button, in time, before it ends, it's going to take you to the dodge success. And the dodge success is structured in much the same way, with all those various bits and bobs. Now, depending on the button that you press, this isn't a QuickTime event so much as a kind of a dialogue event, an uninterruptible event, or an event that's not going to have a negative repercussion based on time. So a non-timed event, basically. So this non-timed event has three options, as you can see here. All that it takes in order to, make these options happen is just a connection to the particular button press that powers a counter. Make sure that you use a counter. You're not going to power it directly to the timeline, and you might ask, why is that? Well, that's because if you do that, you have less control over deactivating specific counters, which we sort of count as events. So this is event number 1, event number 2, event number 3. So make sure that you use a counter. It's also necessary for the sustain feature. There's a whole bunch of reasons. Use a counter. Then when we get to our particular event, I've just done something simple, but you can of course do something like, shall we say, a whole big timeline, and really just add all sorts of new levels and layers to your particular things, which will be great. Yes, friends, I'm now just changing the camera transition so it's a cut. And yeah, so we have done pretty much all that we have to do. And I think the last thing is just to look at our cutscene from the top. Kurr. Kurr. Bleh. Kurr. Bit of a jump there between frames. Probably my camera was just slightly off. Okay, and I'm going to dodge. Hooah! And I'm going to finish this one with a kick. Chua! So there you are, friends. There was a little bit of a jump sort of at one point between frames, but that's probably like one of my cameras, if I zoom in, is, slightly off by a frame or something. Ooh. But you know how to fix that if you have that problem in any event. I think that we've done all that is necessary, and yes. So, friends, I want to thank you so much for checking out this video. This might be my longest one ever, because it's taken me an absolutely tremendous amount of time, but it's also been a lot of fun. And I decided I want to make this long because I want to show you every possible event, every possible thing I know about cutscenes, all the sort of tips and tricks. I want to say a thank you to my boy Tap Giles for, I spoke to my mates about this beforehand, and Vince Cully as well, and we sort of spoke about things, what people were keen on, and he also gave some suggestions in terms of the terminology, like blocking and, disabling the controllers and all these various things. So I want to say thanks to Tap. And yeah, so there we are, friends. We have now a lovely cutscene situation where you can do all sorts of things. You can have it playing out just like a movie. You can have it as a quick time event, a timed event. You can have it as a non-timed event, kind of just like a dialogue option, which is more chilled. And this is all it takes, friends. There's many layers, there's many levels to it, and you can add more and more layers based on all sorts of things. Not only in terms of, like, you can have one event leading into multiple other events, but you also have the layers of the cutscene itself. We're talking about the visuals, we're talking about the animation, We're talking about the, the sound, the lighting, the effects, and so on and so forth. We really just did a cursory jump into cutscenes and all the building blocks that go into it. So, friends, I hope that you found this useful, and let me know if you did. Let me know if you have any questions. And if you know something about dialogue text displays that I don't, because sometimes I just find them a bit janky. But yes, friends, tell me your secrets. Let me know what you've done. And if you make any cool cutscenes, make sure to share them with me. I would definitely be keen to check them out. Send me the In Dreams link. You can just comment it on like one of this video, or whatever it might be. That's the best way, because I read my comments fairly frequently. Every other day or so, I tend to take a look through them. So if you send an In Dreams link, I'll definitely check those out. Alrighty. Thank you so much, friends. I really appreciate all the support, and I shall catch you on the flip-flop.